Hi, everybody. It looks like panelists and attendees are trickling in, so we're going to make a start and hope that more of you will be able to join us as we go along. So hello, and a very warm welcome to today's panel discussion on what it would take to make Africa a global tech superpower, closing the funding gap for African tech startups. I'm Sophie Tolstrup. I'm the head of Tech for Development Policy at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. And it's my great honor to be moderating today's panel of some of the biggest names and the best minds in African tech. We are convening this panel jointly with the team at Ventures Platform. I have to say, this is the first time that I've organized an event with the Discovery Fund. And it won't be the last. So thank you for being the most organized, efficient, and well-connected co-organizers that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So very briefly, why this conversation and why now? The short answer is that Africa's huge potential as a tech startup giant, despite massive recent growth, isn't yet able to be realized due to challenging business environments across the continent and funding that still lags behind other areas of the world. Last week, we convened a closed-door roundtable with government policymakers from across the continent to hear about some of the bold policy measures that countries are putting in place to improve the business environment for tech startups. And I have to say, it was really inspiring. I left that conversation really impressed by the measures that governments across the continent are taking to take this area seriously and to grow tech startup ecosystems. Today, we're taking a slightly different approach and we're following the money, asking our panelists, all of whom are experts in tech funding on the continent, what can be done to close the funding gap for the African tech startup ecosystem. The potential is real. Africa is, as you know, the youngest and most entrepreneurial continent, with an estimated 22% of young people starting their own business and some 10 million people entering the job market each year, both of which add up to a very young, very entrepreneurial, very creative continent who are starting their own businesses and making things happen. And the time, as you all know, is now. Already leading the world in fintech, and with funding growth at 6 times the global average, the continent is also now home to the world's largest free trade area. And we'll hear more from our panelists about what that might mean for the future of the tech ecosystem on the continent. Our expert panelists today are going to walk us through what it would take to close this funding gap and realize that huge potential. So we're going to turn now to the panelists, who I've mentioned several times, and it's my very great pleasure to introduce our all-star and, as of last night, all-female panel today. So we'll start with Odunayo Owenyi, who is the co-founder and chief operating officer of PiggyVest, the first online app for personal savings and investment in West Africa. She also founded First Check Africa, which is an angel fund for female entrepreneurs. And she was named as one of Forbes Africa 30 Under 30 in technology and one of Quartz Africa Innovators in the same year. Rebecca Enonchong is a technology entrepreneur and co-founder and board member of the African Business Angels Network. She's unfortunately a few minutes delayed today, but she will be with us any minute. She's the founder and CEO of Apps Tech and an advisor to VC for Africa and a number of other organizations dedicated to boosting the African tech ecosystem. She's also been named as one of the World Economic Forum's Global Leaders of Tomorrow and Forbes 10 female tech founders to watch in Africa. Third, we turn to Jiba Diallo, who is the senior fintech advisor at EcoBank, and her role aims to grow the bank's support for the fintech sector across the continent, including through its annual EcoBank Fintech Challenge and Fintech Fellowship. She previously worked with Microsoft as a software developer and leading the Microsoft for Africa initiative for startups. We were also due to be joined today by Kola Aina, who's a founding partner at Ventures Platform, our co-organizer today. Unfortunately, as I'm sure everyone on this call can appreciate, due to the fresh travel chaos that many of us are again navigating, he'll be unable to join today. But we want to extend really huge thanks to Kola and his excellent team for all the work in making today's event happen. So before we turn to our panelists, my colleague Blair's bio is going to briefly set the scene. Blaze has been leading our work at TBI in understanding what it would take to build a thriving tech startup ecosystem in Africa and enable African tech to fulfill its massive potential. We're building a roadmap for governments, setting out the key steps needed to support tech startups and enable the best ideas to seed and grow. As a former fintech founder, Blaze brings huge experience and practical knowledge to this project. He's going to start us off by giving a snapshot of the tech startup funding landscape and some of the key challenges, which will then invite our panelists to add to, challenge, and consider. So Blaze, over to you.
Thank you, Sophie, and welcome once again to everybody. I'm going to make a short presentation which covers 3 key areas. First, the tech startup ecosystem landscape within Africa. I'll follow up with a deep dive on the tech funding landscape and some interesting dynamics, and conclude by looking at some of the key challenges to closing the tech funding gap, which my colleague mentioned briefly. Tech has the potential to drive Africa's transformation agenda in many ways. One is through increase or contribution to GDP. The digital economy is estimated to contribute about $300 billion to Africa's GDP by 2025. And we are seeing semblance of this in Nigeria, where the tech sector contributed more to the GDP than oil and gas between 2010 and 2019. The second area is job creation. Whilst 10 to 12 million youth are estimated to enter Africa's job market each year, only about 3 million jobs are created, meaning there's a gap of about 7 to 8 million jobs that needs to be filled. Tech has the potential to drive this once again. In Kenya, for instance, the ICT sector is set to create about 250,000 jobs by 2021, and with an accelerated drive to boost tech within Africa, many other countries can follow this path of Kenya. Apart from the direct contributions to job and GDP, we also see the potential of tech to transform living standards through improvements in health, agri, and public service delivery. Tech in itself as a sector, but more importantly, as a driver or a contributor of all other sectors, has the potential to improve how we deliver education, health, and we saw this during COVID-19 when tech was a key driver in helping students learn from home. Last is shaping our digital future as we enter into the so-called fourth industrial revolution. Africa has remained a consumer of tech products, but to shape our future, the continent needs to become creator of digital products and be able to shape its own destiny as we move into the next tech revolution. The tech funding landscape or the tech ecosystem within Africa has witnessed some positive developments. Between 2015 to 2020, the number of African tech startups receiving financial backing has grown to about 46%, and this is said to be 6 times faster than the global average. This is commendable. However, the continent accounts for just less than 0.2% of the global startup ecosystem value, which means more needs to be done. VC deals in Africa, for instance, are said to compare poorly to their counterparts in Europe, the US, and Asia, for instance. Even though Africa is closer to Latin America in terms of funding gap, we need to put this in perspective. Africa has twice the population of Europe, yet there's about $30 billion funding gap between Africa and Europe. For Africa to become a tech superpower, leaders need to aim to close this funding gap to mature ecosystems like Europe. Therefore, without strengthening the enabling environment for tech startup funding, local tech ecosystem will never reach their potential. The Institute is working on a roadmap to guide governments and policymakers, help them drive, foster vibrant tech ecosystem within their countries and the region at large. And we segmented the work into 3 key areas. One is improving the business environment, and my colleague touched briefly on that, so I'll leave that for now. The next is building local and global networks, which seeks to foster ways by which stakeholders can network, and also build policy fora for cross-border coordination and knowledge sharing. And last week, we organized a workshop that brought together stakeholders to look at this topic and discuss ways to foster our networks. Last is unlocking capital. And that is what this panel is about. We brought together some of the greatest minds within the continent to identify ways we can address some of the challenges to tech startup funding. And I'm excited about this. The funding landscape in Africa has witnessed some dynamics, interesting dynamics, I must say. Growth trajectory has been good. And to reiterate my previous point, between 2015 and 2025, the growth in like funding to tech startup companies is commendable, but more needs to be done through policy to make sure that we achieve, say 10x or even 20x growth in tech startup funding. Geographically, the funding is concentrated in what is known as the Big Five, mainly South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, and Egypt. And 20% of the funded startups have their headquarters outside Africa, mostly in North America, an interesting dynamic as well. And interesting also, eager to hear what Odinio has to say or what is driving this phenomenon. Most of the funding sectors are fintech, agtech, energy, and these together account for about 60% of total tech startup funding. The investor profile, we've seen that it's mostly foreign-based, and this outweighs the local contribution to tech startup funding. About 36% of the investors who participate in VC deals are headquartered in North America, whilst Africa contributes just about 28%, which means unlocking local capital to support this drive is eminent. Deal sizes in Africa compare poorly again to a country like India, which has almost the same size of Africa's population, and Latin America. And so it even gets worse if you're looking at funding sources or funding for smaller ticket sizes like $20,000 or $50,000 for young graduates who want to start companies. Some of the key challenges to closing the funding gap include: one, we are looking at disincentives to investments, and Africa is said not to be attractive to many investors because of the low returns to investment. Two is the risky investment climate. And some of the key factors, we look at our information asymmetries and exchange rates, but mostly the return or the risk of losing one's investments makes it difficult for either local investors to participate or foreign investors to bring in more cash to complement local capital. And we're also looking at the limited sources of funding that exist for tech startups. VC deals dominate, but to become a tech startup giant, Africa needs to unlock new and innovative ways to bring in capital to support tech startup founders. We see solutions ahead, and the Institute is going to make some proposals in our roadmap, which I talked about briefly. But as I said, we have some of the greatest minds here who are going to shed light, and we're also happy to hear their views on how best we can solve these challenges and also close the funding gap. Thank you to everybody, and back to my colleague, Sophie.
Thank you so much, Blaise. So as you can hear, lots of reasons to be hopeful, huge potential, but also a number of challenges to overcome. So what we'll do now is move from the theory to the practice and turn to our panelists. So what I'm going to do first is to ask each of you to just respond very quickly, give us a headline. What do you think the one change that would make the biggest impact on narrowing the funding gap for tech startups between Africa and the rest of the world? So give us a headline and we'll expand on it later. So Jiba, could I turn to you first? What's the one change you think we should make?
Good morning, all. Thank you, Sophie. I was expecting not to be the first to speak, but it's fine. Thank you very much for having me, and pleasure being here. So I don't know if I need to introduce myself quickly. I think you already did. So in a nutshell, I'm managing partnerships between Ecobank and fintechs in the continent. And I'm glad that we went through that presentation, giving the kind of overview of how the ecosystem is in Africa. But I want to say that, yes, the percentage of fund raised by Africa is very low. But I'm glad this morning because I saw a report from an institute saying that for this year, for 2021, we are close to $4 billion in terms of raise funds for this year. I think it's a very good improvement compared to last year where we were at 1.4 billion. So yet many things needs to be done for the continent to have more visibility. So I think two things that I would say is the first one being probably changing the narrative. Changing the perception that maybe the world has regarding the Africa startup landscape. We see so many things happening, and actually every time I'm talking with entrepreneurs, what I tell them is that because we have a lot of issues, we also have a lot of opportunities. So Africa represents a lot of opportunities and in the technology standpoint, and I think we are seeing many very beautiful things happening, especially in the fintech and the agri-tech space. So changing the narrative, I think, is very important. The other thing is that many times also when I talk with investors, what they are telling me is that funds are there. I mean, money is there, but it's difficult for them to find good startups to invest in. Thanks God, things that is also changing. So I think making sure that we provide the right support to startup for them to have to optimize their chances to raise fund, and better organize also maybe the diaspora, let's say, financing opportunity that we see in the world is something that we should have a specific look at. So let me stop there. I think that's enough for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for getting us started on such a positive and hopeful note. So changing the narrative, changing the perception, you think is the key thing we need to do to close this funding gap. Fantastic. Odin, could I turn to you next for your take? What's the one change we could make to narrow this gap?
Well, I mean, I think that we can change the narrative, but ultimately, I think we just need to fund more women deliberately. And so for me, it's really less about what people think and more about what people can see, how much money is actually going to women, right? We were reading the report a couple weeks ago about how the African tech ecosystem has raised $3 billion, and about $21 million of that went to solo female founders, and another very negligible, say 500, 600, went to teams with at least one female on the leadership team, right? In the grand scheme of things, that's an increase. But in the grander scheme of things, it doesn't move the needle. And so more money needs to be redirected towards the people who need them. And a significant way to change that would be representation. We need more women on the other side of the table. In tech, we usually talk about a chicken and egg situation. People fund people who look like them. They can say no, but it's an unconscious bias, right? You don't know you're using those heuristics, but in the end, you're more comfortable with the person who speaks like you, who acts like you, who's more likely to behave like you, who's more likely to make decisions like you. In many of those cases, men differ from women, right? We have different needs and different outlooks and different roadmaps and things like that. So you need more female founders, but you also need more people, more women on the other side of the table who are willing to take a chance on people who look like them, right? So when I hear the story of a woman who's starting a company and it's relating to a personal issue that she has, I feel more connected to her and I feel more inclined to say, I think this can take off. For a lot of people who cannot relate to that situation, it is just what it is, a personal story. So we definitely need more representation on the venture capital side. We need more emerging market fund managers who will make sure that these funds are going to diverse teams, right? When we started First Check earlier this year, the idea was we are going to only fund companies that have at least one woman on the co-founding team. It's been 10 months, I think 11 months now. We funded 6 teams that I'd never heard of before that have at least one woman on the leadership team. Half of those teams are actually CEO'd by women. That's what happens, I think, when you have women directing where money goes. So we need more money going to emerging fund managers. We need more emerging fund managers to set up shop. And then we need more of them to fund women and create that like vicious cycle that ends up adding more women as it just keeps going around.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And you could not have given us a better segue to Rebecca. So from calling for more women on the other side of the table to a woman on the other side of the table, Rebecca, for you, what is the one big change we could make?
We need more Africans investing in Africans. I think one of the challenges that we've had is that most of this money, and this is great news about the $4 billion that was announced this morning about this extra funding. That means that we're on the right trajectory. We're really moving in the right direction, and that's really exciting to see because we see that investors, real investors, not impact. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to say that impact investors aren't real investors. I'm just saying that for many years, what we saw in Africa was actually investors had the name foundation attached to them, or were impact investors. And African entrepreneurs had this additional burden of proving that their startup had impact. Which startups on the rest of, in the rest of the world don't have to show or demonstrate. And we know that every single startup on the continent has impact, because it creates jobs, it creates wealth, and it contributes to the development of the continent. So impact is never a question, regardless of what sector the startup is in. So, but one of the challenges that we've had is that we see foreign founders getting the bulk of the large investments. And that's because most of the investors are foreign as well. And so how do we improve the local investment ecosystem? And that's really what we've been working on at ABAN, the African Business Angels Network. It is, how do we support the local investor, give the local investor the tools, the skills to invest in startups locally, so that Africans can invest in Africans, because we so better understand the local context. And there's some startups that would not make any sense to a foreigner, that are so logical to either an African or African diaspora. So really, I think that that's really what we're working on, is African to African investment. And also because when the investor, when there's an exit, there's money, right? That's a lot of money that goes where? Does it come back into the African ecosystem, or does it go to Silicon Valley? And so if we can get more of those investors to make money and reinvest in the ecosystem, and we've started to see that with some of the local investors, for instance, in Paystack, that invested early, that made millions of US dollars, and then are able to reinvest that into more startups. And so we're going to see more and more of that, and that's really, I think, where the next step is.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So 3 really clear calls to action to get us started. 1, change the narrative. 2, invest in women. And 3, make sure that there are more Africans and more African sources of funding investing in African tech startups. What a great start. Thank you so much. Rebecca, we're going to stay with you for the first question. I know that you joined a few minutes into Blair's presentation, but he was giving us a current snapshot of the investor and funding landscape, which Jiba has already said has been improved upon this year. So we're already heading in the right direction. But we're going to ask you to turn from the present day and look to the future. So how do you see the next 10 years panning out for Africa's tech startup ecosystem? What's the dream scenario, and what do we need to change to get us there?
I think the dream scenario is a little bit of what I've talked about, is, we don't have that many VCs. Like for investment to be successful, right? For the investment ecosystem to be successful, it has to have layers. You have to have the first checks, right? And then after that, you've got, the pre-seed and the seed and the A and the B and the C and the D. How do we get investors in every single one of those layers to be local African investors? And that means that even government, pensions need to trust some of these VCs and local VCs, and put money and invest money into some of these venture funds, so that they can invest into local startups. But I think that that's what we're going to see more and more as we have more and more success stories. And I think that's what's important, is that you'll have investors that have FOMO. They're like, wait a minute, how come I didn't get in on this deal? I think the more success stories we have, the more we'll be able to get investors to believe in African startups and African entrepreneurs. And I think that's really where we will see in 10 years, we're at 4 billion in 2021. We'll be at 40 billion or more in 2020. Things are just, the trajectory is just incredible, and there's so much potential on the continent. We have so much opportunity on the continent. We have such vibrant, incredible entrepreneurs on the continent. And sometimes I hear this pipeline issue that we don't have investable startups, and that's incorrect. I think maybe those investable startups don't have the visibility that they should, and we're improving that. And so yeah, I think that's what we'll see. I think we really need to support and do more, because we've done a lot to support the startups, right? We have all these tech hubs across the continent. There are 800 of them now. 320 of them are a member of AfriLabs, and AfriLabs has a program for capacity building for those startups, so that they can be more investment ready. But we've done all that work, a lot of work with startups, but we haven't done it on the investor side. So you have a lot of people that are high net worth individuals that have the funds to invest, or investment firms that are doing more PE and not doing startups. And so we just really need to have them get the skills and understand what the startup ecosystem is like, how much potential is there, and start to invest. But I'm so excited, I'm so positive. I don't think 10 years ago we imagined how far we would be and how important our startup ecosystem would be to the entire economy of the continent, and how much it would contribute to the development of the continent. And it's been mind-boggling, and I'm so excited. So the next 10 years I'm very positive about.
That is fantastic to hear. And then we just stay with you for 1 second and ask, how do you see the role? So as I mentioned last week, we had this fantastic and very inspiring roundtable with leaders from across the continent who are putting in place policy measures to try and improve the business environment for tech startups, and governments across the continent seem really dedicated to this, and they're dedicating a lot of time and resource, and it was a very inspiring conversation. But how does that look from where you sit? What's the role of governments in all of this?
So they've got it all wrong. Sorry to say, but sometimes even when they're well-intentioned, they make the craziest decisions. I think that they need to get, and we've done that. I think that the startup community has gotten together and put together a manifesto to say these are the types of policies, like I4 policy. AfriLabs has worked on things. These are the policies that help our ecosystem. And having government leaders sit together and say this is what startups need is not the answer, because on the one hand they'll say, oh yeah, we support the digital economy. On the other side, they'll tax mobile money transactions. Right. On one side, they will, say they support the digital economy, and on the other side, they'll disconnect the internet. And so, those types of, there's one thing about the discourse, and there's a whole different thing about the reality on the ground. And I think that many government leaders don't even respect the digital economy as a real industry. They're treating it as like this pet project, like this, oh, those cute little entrepreneurs. And I've had this happen, and I'm sure everybody here has had it happen, where a government official will call and say, oh, we have a conference on startups. Can you please send us 10 startups, as if we're props. So I think, a lot more needs to be done for government to talk to startup entrepreneurs, to talk to the ecosystem. I think Nigeria is doing a good job today in putting together its Startup Act, in being more inclusive. I just hope that they actually implement the recommendations that are made by these individuals, these fantastic individuals that they brought together to work on the Startup Act. I really hope that they actually carry those out. But yeah, I think we're very, very far cry from where we need to be as far as government policy is concerned.
Great, that is a good reality check, and good to hear. And we'll be watching closely based on those words over the coming months and years, what implementation looks like and what the consultation process looks like, and checking in with you at a later stage to see how you see the trajectory. Thank you. So we're going to turn to Odun now. As the founder of a wildly successful tech company, how does all of this evolution of the landscape look from a startup perspective? And what have you learned in PiggyVest's journey about how to attract the right mix of funding from the right sources that you wish you'd known when you were starting out?
Well, I mean, I think I wholly agree with Rebecca. Like, we're definitely not where we were when I started my journey. I joined tech right out of university in 2013. And in those days, $25,000 was a great like seed funding amount, right? Like if you raise 25K, everyone is excited. And today 25K is one single check. It forms a part of, it's not even like a great pre-seed round. And I think that signifies progress, right? Because startups do need resources to grow, right? And when we started PiggyVest in 2016, the early believers that you find easily today, people who make up your early rounds, the GBs of Nigerian tech ecosystem, the first checks and the lofty inks, we didn't have that. It took me 18 months to get the first 50K into PiggyVest. And then after those 18 months, it took another year to complete like the first seed round for $1 million. So I think that we've made like incredible, beautiful progress. That means that the startups that are coming after us are not having the difficult time that we did, which is great, because what you want is to go walk through that door, hold it open, so everyone coming after has it easier. That being said, the things I wish I'd known would be things like, well, I mean, just like keep at it, keep building. It's really hard as a founder not to focus on how do I raise, because you do need the money. But what I found is just keeping at it and just building that little amount of traction takes you from we need this money to we can either take or leave your money. And seeing as when PiggyVest raised that $1 million, we haven't gone back to market in the past 3 years to raise funding. And we've had incredibly like many conversations with people who are like, so when are you raising? And, you know, when are you going to raise? How are you going to do it? And so I think that there is something to be said for the traditional boots down, heads down approach, where you're just building and building and building and trying to show that there is something here. For a lot of people, I recognize the privilege of saying that, because when we started, we didn't have money, but we definitely had supporters. And that's another thing I'd like to say is the incredible value of a really connected network within your ecosystem, right? When we were raising and when it was difficult, we had the people like Olumide Shoyombo, Kola Ino Ventures platform, Tommy Davies of the Africa Angel Network. All of these people were around us, right? Holding us together, even when it felt like we're not sure like this thing is going to make it. As a founder who's had like several failed ventures, it's been kind of eye-opening to see the transition from we're building this incredibly new thing. No one has really done it before. How are you going to help us to this thing now has X million users and seeing the reaction that it has. So for many founders, the journey is going to be much like that. You know, it starts really slow. I wish I'd learned that like really slow part is absolutely normal. It will happen. You cannot escape it. You just need to like endure it for a little while, get the right network around you, have the right co-founding team. Whether or not you have resources, really, the resilience of your team is what makes or breaks the startup. So we had a very resilient team. We were 4 or 5 people for 18 months because there wasn't any resources to hire more people. And it was like everyone had like 5 hands because you were carrying out several different roles. All of those things, they're very anecdotal, very life lesson-y, but that's kind of what it takes, I think, to run a startup, especially in Africa. Resources don't come to us until much later. Even now that we're celebrating like the large pre-seed rounds, the world has kind of moved on from those sizes of pre-seed rounds, and we're seeing people raising like millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in their first ever funding round. Now we will get there, but it's always a journey for us to get there. And I think it's worth it as an African founder to embrace that. In those challenges, that's where the opportunities are.
Awesome, thank you. That is great to hear. I want to take you back also to Jiba's second point in the opening round, where she said she hears all the time from funders that the money is there, but the startups to invest in are not. What's your take on that? Would you agree? Do you think they're wrong? And what can we do to connect them better?
I don't agree. I don't think the startups are there. The startups are there. Like, there's so many startups that need funding. This is the same narrative when you ask people, why is your pipeline 100% male? They'll be like, there are no female founders. I don't think that's true at all. I think that there is a lot more work that needs to be done to identify those startups, but they're there. There's female startups looking for funding. There's African startups. If you throw a stone, you hit an African startup looking for funding. We're here, very, very present, looking for the early believers, looking for people who are willing to take those journeys. What they're trying to say mostly is usually that the easy startups aren't there. And you know why? African problems are hard. They take a lot out of a founder. They are not straightforward. When you are investing in an African founder, you are investing in a tiny little president of his own domain, because he's not just going to run that startup. He's going to create infrastructure for his company. He's going to run transport for his company. We will provide our own electricity for the most part. We'll provide our own security. We'll provide our own infrastructure. If we didn't have Paystack, payment startups will still be building their own payment rails today. So the problems are not easy. The problems are hard. They take an investor who is very well versed in them, like Rebecca said. That's why we need more African money, right? We need people who understand that the problems aren't A, B, and then you get straight to Z. There's a lot of twists and turns, and they require a lot of resilience. We've heard the Paystack story. We've heard the Flutterwave story. We've heard the story of Capricorn, and all of any African startup that's made it will tell you that the story is absolutely not easy. We're not just facing infrastructural concerns, we have regulatory ones as well. So if you say African startups are not there, I say no, that's not true. African startups solving straightforward problems, there are not many, and that's because not a lot of our problems are straightforward.
Fantastic. That is a great note to end on. And I don't know if you've had a chance to see the chat, but your fan club is out in force. Strong support for what you're doing and what you said just then. So do take a look. Jiba, we're going to turn to you now. And I realized, by the way, that it was not you saying that the startups are not there and that you see things in a more hopeful way. So you may want to go back to that. But the question that I wanted to ask you is about the regional perspective. So obviously you work across the continent, and we've talked a lot in the intro and in Blair's presentation about the significance of Africa becoming the world's largest free trade area as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement kicks into gear. So from where you sit, how do you see that regional integration affecting startup funding and growth now? And what are your hopes for the future?
Yes, thank you, Sophie. So as you're right, I want to come back to that statement. And it's actually interesting because it's a statement that I got from a member of the Africa Business Angel Network. Yes, it was a few years ago, but at that time we were having the discussion and he was telling me, we have investors ready, but we are struggling sometimes finding startups. And I think the reason why is, as Rebecca was mentioning, many times is because sometimes startups don't know how to present themselves in a positive way or optimized way for them to raise funds. But thanks God, things are changing. So we see a lot of initiatives such as many networks trying to fill the gap between the investors and the ecosystem. I think that is really needed. I remember a few years ago when I was working with companies such as Flutterwave and Paystack, one thing that we were doing with them is we were putting them in touch with kind of agencies or expert to help them, be ready to talk to investors. And we saw the outcome. It was really great, and we were very happy. And I think that is needed. So the ecosystem is there, is very vibrant. I think we are seeing more and more individuals and organizations willing to invest in Africa, but the risk is still there. And that's, where some work needs to happen. It is there, but And that's the reason why earlier I was talking about, changing the narrative, being more positive on the way we present our ecosystem, our entrepreneurs, our startups. They are very, very unbelievable. We see so many very nice things happening. And every time I'm seeing, for once, Africa is leading the world in the fintech space. We need to acknowledge that. For once, we are leading in somewhere. So we need to kind of take that as a win, and I'm sure that we will have other wins here or other spaces. So things are changing, but some work still need to happen. Coming back to, sorry, I also want to comment on what Rebecca was saying on the regulation and government. Yes, it's very difficult. And yes, our government are quite far away from the, let's say, innovation world and startup worlds that is very vibrant in the continent. But thanks God, also things are changing. I'm very surprised in my region, in the UEMORA region, because I'm seeing more and more the regulators coming to us, asking us how we can put them in close touch with fintechs, with startups, because they want to understand, they want to help. They understand that this is the space where they can leverage on those innovators, because they really can help them on the increasing the financial inclusion that is a real need in the continent. So I think they understand, many of them understand that things need to change, and they are taking some initiatives to do so. Things are not going to happen overnight. 10 years ago, we would not believe that we will be there today with this ecosystem, and it's going to change because we have no other way to do. The technology will be the only driver, or one of the biggest driver of this continent. It's something that we need to take into consideration. So coming back to the I guess we want to talk about the Africa trade agreement that has been announced a few months ago. But I think one discussion, many times when I have a discussion with entrepreneurs, one thing that I tell them very often is think big when you start. So for the startups in Nigeria, it's easy because they already have the market there. For startups in Togo, for example, it will be a bit tricky. But many times the issues that populations are facing in Cameroon, for example, is very similar in Gabon. Another in Mali will be very close to what is happening in Burkina. So many times I'll tell them to see the market, the world market, not only countries, but the region as their market, as an opportunity. And I know it's very easy to say, but not that easy to do. And I know many of our friends in Nigeria are trying to come to the Francophone part of the continent, which is good. But I'm also pushing our startups in the Francophone space to go, in Nigeria and in Ghana and elsewhere to see what they can do there. And it's very interesting. A few weeks ago, I was talking with an entrepreneur in Senegal, and I'd asked him, what would be your advice when we keep saying to the entrepreneur, think big? What would be your advice? How can they do that? And he said, go to Nigeria and talk to the Nigerian people. They are crazy enough to feel understand that you need to think big. And the market is very fragmented in the continent because we have small countries. But this agreement is really an opportunity, to change and to really consider the whole continent, which is almost 2 billion people that they can market with. And to me, it's the biggest market that we can see now in the world, actually. And one of the reasons why China became China is probably because of the population. So this is a real opportunity that entrepreneurs should, consider. And again, I don't have the solution, but I really want to push them, to think big many times when they start business. So when you have an idea, think of a solution that you are solving, a problem that you are solving, finding a solution, but think big, because we shouldn't consider Africa as fragmented countries, but as a whole. And it's a really great opportunity. So it's for now, I feel that it's just on the paper again, but let's make sure that it's going to be real and that entrepreneurs will really benefit from that opportunity.
Great. So think of Africa as the world's biggest market, and therein lies the secret to becoming a tech superpower. I love that. And let's get this agreement from an agreement on paper to an agreement in practice that really changes the world. I have one more question for you, and I realize I did not give you a heads up on this, so apologies in advance. But we heard from Blair and we've heard from other panelists that obviously fintech is the star performing sector in Africa. And you, of course, have spent your career in fintech, are an expert in fintech in particular. What do you think other sectors can learn from the success of fintech in Africa? What do you think are the key lessons that they can draw in ag tech, in climate tech, in energy, in health tech, in the other sectors that we see?
Okay, I'll hate to say that because the regulators will kill me, but I think they need to think out of, the regulation actually. They need to think out of the box, because that's what happened. When M-Pesa started in Kenya, no one thought that it will work because it was something completely new, and there were no regulation, no framework, it was just something that came out and became a real success. And I also think that we need to make sure that we are not trying to copy paste from what is happening out of the continent, because Africa is very specific. We have our own realities. We have our, the continent is very specific. You need to understand what is happening there. So that's why I very agree with what Rebecca was saying on, ideally, we want Africans to invest in Africa, and that joins the point that I was making on the diaspora as well, because many of them want to invest in the continent, but they don't really know how to do that, actually. So I think it's an opportunity that we need to look at. So think out of the box, think African, think your realities around you. Don't try to copy paste. Yes, I think from there, we should see very, very beautiful things happening, especially in the agri-space, the agri-tech space. I really think that, the opportunity is there. So for now, fintech is leading the way, but I'm pretty sure that we are going to see many very beautiful things happening in the other areas because the needs are there. Definitely.
Thank you so much. And I love that you've used this phrase, which now all three panelists have used, that you see beautiful things happening, you see great things happening, and this is very inspiring. Just a reminder, I'm seeing a few questions pop into the Q&A box, and we will get to audience questions imminently. So if there are things that you want to hear more about, things that you want to challenge, questions that you want to ask, please do put them in the question and answer box, and we will get straight to you and put those questions to our panelists. Just before we go to our listeners, to our audience, I wanted to give the three of you a chance to pick up on what others have said. Do you have any questions for your fellow panelists? So Odun, let's go to you first. Is there anything that Rebecca or that Jiba has said that you want to follow up on or interrogate?
No, not really. I think in very different ways, we've kind of all managed to say the same things. So, I agree.
Fantastic. That's what I like to hear. Jiba, over to you. Any questions for your fellow panelists?
Oh, no, actually, no questions. Just congratulate all of them. It's really great to see, women leading in the space where they are focusing in. I've been exchanging with the Africa Business Network since several years now. Many of, not necessarily the whole organization, but individual people. So it is great to see an organization, as I say, trying to fill the gap between investors and startups. That's a need. And I think PiggyVest is one of the big example of a fintech that is very successful in the continent, and we need more of this. Yes, and we need more female entrepreneur. Again, I don't have the solution for that, but it's definitely something that we need to have a look at, because definitely I don't want to say I know the male will be very unhappy, but unfortunately, women are much better in managing organization and enterprises. So yes, but I'm very confident in general on what is happening in the continent, and I'm very happy to be close to what is happening right now in the African continent. Very happy.
Fantastic, thank you. And Rebecca, over to you. Any questions or comments for your fellow panelists?
So actually, I just wanted to comment on, both of the Ojiba and Odu talked about, supporting the startups and getting them more visibility, and increasing the connections between entrepreneurs and investors. And I think what we've done at ABAN, and I really want to clarify what ABAN is, because people always contact ABAN to get an investment. ABAN is a nonprofit organization that supports early stage investment in startups. It's not an investment vehicle. So what ABAN is really trying to create more angel networks, support angel investors by getting them into boot camps and master classes on, how to do a transaction, how to invest in a startup, what are exits, and really, create a community of investors, just as we have a community of startups and entrepreneurs. So what we've also done is create a program in collaboration with AfriLabs. So the hubs and the investors are connected. They're linked through an actual program where what we thought was really necessary is to create and strengthen that relationship. How do you strengthen angel investors and strengthen the startups and the hubs, all that are supporting these startups? And so we created a program called Catalytic Africa. So it's catalytic-africa.com. And what Catalytic Africa does is to match the money that the angel investor, that's a part of an angel network that's in ABAN, invest in a startup that's in one of the AfriLabs member hubs, and we will double or triple that investment. And so if the angel investor or the angel investors put in 10,000 euro or less, we will double that money. If the network or the angel investor puts in over 20,000 euro, we will triple that money. And so we were able to raise 1.5 million from the French Development Agency, AFD, thank you, for this program, for this matching program. It goes in as a grant, so it's equity free. But for that, you need to register on the Catalytic Africa program. You must be in an AfriLabs member network. And so a lot of these startup entrepreneurs, they want to go in on their own, and you're only eligible if you are in a hub, and there are 320 of them. So unless you're in the 2 countries that don't have members, or the 3 countries, I think, that don't have a member hub, there's going to be a member hub in your country that can support you through the process of getting investment ready. Because I think one of the things that we're not doing well as African entrepreneurs is that even though we're really fantastic entrepreneurs and we're building great businesses, we don't necessarily understand the fundraising process. And so foreign founders are eating our lunch because they understand how that fundraising works. And so we want to make sure that the entrepreneurs have those tools to raise that money. And AfriLabs has a program, a capacity building program, that's very tailored to our environment, that will support the hubs in delivering those that information to the startups. Sorry, it was so long, but it's a really important program. And we're trying to raise more money, one for gender, so that to raise money so that we can do matching for women and entrepreneurs on the continent, also geography specific funds. So yeah, this is so it's catalytic-africa.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rebecca. And please don't apologize. It responds that what you've just said responds to lots of the questions in the chat. So really great to hear. Thank you. And no more foreign founders eating your lunch. I really like that image. And it's one that will stay with me. So thank you. There are some brilliant questions in the Q&A box. So I want to get to our audience questions for all of you. Odun, you're up first. The question aimed at you is from Paulette Watson, who agrees strongly with you that women are underrepresented and that this is a real problem. She asks, what training or support, what resources are available out there for African women to be included in the tech ecosystem? What do you see that gives you hope?
Right. I mean, I think that there's a lot of accelerators out there, from Greenhouse Labs to Future Females Invest, to Founders Factory, and to even just like the generic ones like Y Combinator and all of those people who take like a gender balance like cohort. So there's quite a bit of material out there. You're able to just like do a bit of research and figure out how do you want to be included. And one of the beautiful things about the tech ecosystem is that you don't have to become a coder to be participating in the ecosystem. There is several ways, right? You can be an operator, a product manager. So there is programs. I think there's one run, there's Utiva, there's Treford. There's so many programs out there that are training people to be product managers. There's programs training people to be customer support officers. There's programs training people to become like product like experts. There's so many ways to participate that like you don't have to be limited to I want to learn to code, which of course you can because you have Decagon, old school Africa. And so the material out there is boundless. So if you do decide that you want to like participate in the tech ecosystem, work in tech in one capacity or the other, all you need to do is sit at your computer and Google. I guarantee you it takes you less than 10 minutes to find what you're looking for as that first step that you need to get into tech. And like a lot of internship matching programs are also out there right now, which means that if you decide you want to go into tech, after studying, a lot of these schools are able to place you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we're going to turn to Jiba now with a question from James, who asks, how much do you think deposit banks in Africa are ready to fund tech startups? And I think he reflects that from his experience and from his knowledge, many banks are still figuring it out and still don't fully understand how tech startups operate, how they work, and so require, huge hurdles in order to access that funding. How do you see progress, and what's your take on the role of banks in funding tech startups?
I was expecting that question. No, it's a question that I'm having every time, and even myself when I joined the bank, it's a question that I was asking myself. And many times when I'm talking with fintechs, I have to tell them that banks a few years ago, because things are changing, were seeing fintechs, for example, as aliens because they could not understand how a tech company could be in the financial space. But things are changing now. So the reason why I believe banks are not yet investing in startups is just because it's not the traditional ecosystem of investment that they are familiar with. I think it's just as simple as that. They have their own way of operating, and doing loans with SMEs and other organizations, but they don't really know that space of startups and innovators. They don't understand, all the wording in terms of seed, Series A,
it's
Series
12
B,
o'clock.
Series, all those things. It's quite, a bit far away from what they are used to do. But thanks to God, things are changing. I think the first thing that needs to change, I'm going to talk again about the narrative, and it's a real discussion that I'm having right now with my colleagues, is that we need to show to banks the huge opportunity that startup represents, and this is starting. So when you see all those unicorns coming out now, it's obvious, that something very interesting is happening. But change needs to happen within the bank to have the right engines to be able to do investment in the startup world. It's not there yet. But that work needs to happen, and I'm sure it will happen within the next few years, because it's in the interest of the bank to kind of be part of the fostering of this ecosystem. It's positive for them because the outcome will be there anyways. So that work needs to happen internally within banks, and on our side, we are having the discussion on seeing how we can, enter to that space. Because we want to be part of, all the good things that we keep mentioning happening in the continent. And because we are a Pan-African bank, we always want to see, again, the continent as a whole. And the fact that we are seeing many of the startups starting in one country, and now that, being able to extend to many countries, in partnership, actually, many times with EcoBank, is something that is very positive. So that discussion is happening on our side, and I'm sure it's happening in other banks. So I'm pretty sure that we'll see things moving very soon.
Great. That is really positive and good to hear. Thank you. We're going to turn to Rebecca now. I realize we've had this question a few times in a few ways, and we've heard two different views on it. One is that governments are simply getting it wrong and they're not listening to the right people, and that there's a big gap between what we see on paper and what's being implemented. And one slightly different view in that governments are falling short in a lot of ways, but trying to listen to the right people and do the right thing. I wonder, Rebecca, if we can just dive a little bit deeper. And so Austin Emma asks the question, what are African governments doing to encourage more startups? So maybe what do you see happening? What do you see changing that gives you hope in this space?
I think that they are starting to talk to the right people. A lot of times, for a very long time, when governments were talking about a policy for the digital economy, they were talking to the World Bank, they were talking to the IMF, they were talking to, these international organizations that have no clue either, that are also trying to improve and trying to do better and trying to better understand the ecosystem. So I think that now they're actually, in many countries, you see them talking to the actual stakeholders and seeing, what is it that you need? Now, at the end, they're not necessarily implementing those. And sometimes they'll implement on one side and then do something crazy on the other side. It's like the government, they're not talking to each other within the government unit. And so, but we are finding champions within each government and, trying to grab onto those champions and to get them to push our agenda forward. But, one of the things that we've done, and that's really important, is we've come together as the African startup ecosystem. It's like we are one community. And the strength of that community is it means that when there is a government, a startup act that's being worked on in one country, there's so much collaboration from people from other countries are saying, hey, this is what we tried, this is what worked. And sometimes the governments in our countries, for instance, are more likely to listen to people from other countries. And so I think, there is movement, but it's way too slow. It's way too slow, and it's way too contradictory. There's the taxation, especially, and Jiva talked about this in the Francophone area. It's such an opportunity, but the regulations there are so heavy. The bureaucracy is so heavy in so many of these French-speaking countries that it makes it very, very difficult to be a business at all. And to be a startup, it's even more challenging. And so I think that some of the changes and some of these governments that are actually really talking to the stakeholders, I think that's the future, and that will improve things.
Fantastic, thank you. So a clear message there for governments.
I hope. I pray.
No,
I pray. Yeah.
It's very clear. The clear message: move faster, listen more, and be more coherent in your policies. I think that's a great message to deliver. Thank you. So the next question is a great one. So I'm going to start with Ardoon, but I'm going to also give the other two panelists a chance to respond because I think it's very interesting and I would like to hear the answer. So Sana Bedi says, What do you anticipate to be the next big tech trend to shape the startup ecosystem in the continent? Aldun, let's go to you first.
Well, I think decentralized financing. And that's kind of wildly obvious from where like the continent is going. For once, we are par for par with the world in how we're approaching and adopting cryptocurrency and other like decentralized like finance channels. And so once our governments get along with the program, I think that there is a lot that DeFi and crypto and the rest of like all those new technologies and Web3, you know, can do for where Africa is and our participation in the like general global tech ecosystem. There's kind of a lot going on right now, but if you pick on one thread and you just follow it, it kind of opens you up to like a world of possibilities that I definitely would like to see permeate like Nigeria and eventually like the rest of Africa.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So decentralized financing is your answer. Jiba, a different answer from you, or do you agree?
So I'm sorry, I want to make sure that I understand the question. Can you please repeat that?
Sure. So the question is, what is the trend, the latest trend that you see shaping the Africa tech startup ecosystem? What tech trend do you think is shaping the system?
Okay, so yes, a few months ago, maybe I would have said, blockchain. But when I saw what Nigeria did with the Naira, maybe you can tell us more about that. You know, at the beginning, I was like, okay, let's watch it too.
I'm still learning it, so.
But it seems that, you know, at least we something is happening, right? So again, maybe we don't necessarily need to do copy paste. Maybe we can have our own kind of technology that we can develop in the continent that is very specific to our needs and see how things will happen. I think I'm seeing a lot of trend in the space, especially on about the fintech space, on all the credit scoring engines, because that's also a very big need to make sure that the population is financially included and that we are supporting initiatives that are happening around the continent. So that's also a space that we should watch. But you know, I always hate doing prediction when it goes to technology because it's so difficult to predict what will happen. We never know. But I would be very pleased if we can have in Africa our kind of own technology that is very specific to our needs, and really solving an issue, a big issue that we are having in the continent. So I think maybe that's a message that I'm going to send to innovators across the continent. Create something that is very specific to our continent, and we'll see what will happen. Hopefully the rest of the world will copy for us, and that would be very interesting to see.
Fantastic. That is a very interesting, very nuanced prediction. I like it. Rebecca, very tough to go third on predicting the next
right?
big tech trend.
I'm going to take Jiba and go one higher.
Okay.
We're going to be building for the world. I think that Africa and our startups can be the leaders in building and developing innovation for the world. And so not necessarily for Africa, but for the world. And I think that the digital economy is the way forward for the continent. It's really an opportunity for the continent to develop and to create wealth and to create jobs. And I really believe in that economy. If it's supported and if it's respected as an industry, it can really, really transform the continent as mobile has, right? So we've seen the transformation just from this, right? And from this. And so you can imagine how much further we can go. If we can do it for mobile, imagine, we can really transform not just our continent, but support the transformation and be an added value to the entire world.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Building for the world. I love it. We are going to turn now to, actually, Rebecca, we're going to stay with you for this one. So another question from Paulette Watson. She mentions that she sees a lot of tech startups popping up all over the place from her perspective in Ghana. And her question is about sustainability. So what next? Lots of startups are coming into being. What is the hope for their growth and continued existence? And how are entrepreneurs being supported in scaling up?
Listen, startups in Silicon Valley have like a 5% success rate, right? So we shouldn't beat up ourselves because we have startups that fail. Startups fail. That's the nature of startups. If all startups were successful, then which ones would we invest in? It's all so it's the nature of the industry. Is there is a lot of failure in startups. So we should expect that. It shouldn't be that, because we're in Africa, all of a sudden we have to have 100% success rate. No one on any continent expects all of startups to be successful. And so we learn from our failures and we learn from other people's failures. But I think that, again, I will go back to the structuring of the ecosystem. I will go back to the hubs. What we've done at AfriLabs is really to get the hubs the necessary skills and support so that they can better support the startups. And so there was a capacity building program, a 3-year program for African hubs to participate in. And it's not exclusive, it's not only for the member hubs. And so, there are 320 of them that are members, but any hub can take the opportunity to take this training so that they can better support their startups, so those startups can be more sustainable, right? And so, a lot of it is there are little tweaks, I think, sometimes that the startup needs, that the entrepreneur needs. And I saw in the chat, it's like, but we reach out to people on social media and they're not responsive. That's because it's very difficult. I know, all the women on this panel are so incredibly busy that we structure the way we support entrepreneurs, right? First check, or working with angel groups, or working with, and so because we structure the way we work with entrepreneurs, it's best to get in touch with the structures that we're working with. That will prepare you for investment. So many times I think entrepreneurs feel that they're ready and they're not. They don't know how to present their startup in a way that is investor friendly. Investor ready. Investors are super busy. We don't want to see, unlike some bankers, a huge long business plan. But there are things that we're interested in, and what is it that we invest in? What type of investors? So I think entrepreneurs also need to invest their time in learning. There's lots of resources online that are available in addition to those that are available through the hubs. There's I put it in the chat, somebody wanted to know about where that report came out for the 4 billion. There's a really, really great database created by some investors and it's Substack, thebigdeal.substack.com. You can subscribe to the database itself, which and there's so much information on it. Who is investing in the startups on the continent? What startups are raising what money? How many are women founded? So that you can really target the right investors too, because not all investors invest at every level. Not all investors invest in every sector. And so do your homework. It really helps for you to do your homework, get the resources that you need to get that support, subscribe to that newsletter. I mean, not the newsletter, to the database. I think there are discounts. It's it's nearly free for many entrepreneurs. If you say you're a startup, they'll give you a really great discount so that you can build yourself and get yourself the skills and the resources that you need to be successful. It doesn't mean you will be, but at least give yourself the chance to use all of those available resources to help your business be more sustainable and successful. Not just sustainable. Sustainability is not enough. We really want real success, real success.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's so helpful. And I see there are a couple of calls for that website, so maybe one of my colleagues could just pop the link in the chat. That would be super helpful. And speaking of the chat, I see that there's a really lively debate going on in there. Rebecca, you're doing much better at me than multitasking. I have not been able to follow it. So please do, if you have questions for the panelists, we have just a few minutes left, so keep them coming in the Q&A box. I did see one slightly provocative question, which has now disappeared, but I'm going to ask it anyway to our panelists. Odin, this one's for you. We had a question from Alexandre who asked, given the wealth of resources that you guys have all talked about that are available for startup founders, why do we see so many startup founders across the continent still struggling? And I think I want to kind of blend that with something that you said earlier about the particular challenges that pertain to founders on the continent, where you're not only having to build and grow your business, but you're also having to kind of build an infrastructure all around that and a world in which your startup can thrive. So it's a question that you could take in a number of ways, but I wonder, having talked about African problems for founders being particularly hard, what you see as the hardest of those and where you see potential for us to do better.
I mean, I think that the first thing is when you're building a startup, the availability of resources, right? African startups, people are starting companies they want to build, and our problems are really unique, right? We're not just like, it's not just a matter of I'm going to get an idea and I'm going to put a deck together and I'm going to get my early believers to, to be ready to come and invest right now. It's that you need to put the idea together, right? And then you need to start to search for the first set of resources. There's a privilege that allows you to be able to invest your own personal funds into starting your dream, your company. And then there's the flip side of the equation where you just can't. And that means that a lot of your frustration is born out of, how do I get enough resources to get this off the ground? And so it's a question of, where are those early believers? That's the first question. That's the first problem that you face is, I'm starting this thing. I have an MVP or what looks like an MVP. Now I need to actually take it to the next stage. You need money for that. A lot of people cannot access that money, right? Resources are available. You can read, and you can get mentorship. We are heavily over-mentored, right? And in just as much underfunded. And so there's a lot of resources, accelerator programs at the end of which you get no cash. There are many, they're there. And that's not to say they're doing a bad thing, but we need the balance, right? Where after you go through all those lessons, you're going to need the money to practice those lessons. We don't have that. That's still a journey. Second thing is the infrastructural challenges. They're still there, right? When you start your company, you raise a pre-seed of 100K, and at the very least, 20% of that is literally spent keeping the lights on, buying data. I was speaking at the World Bank one time, and we're doing the comparison on data costs to income, and we still ride the lowest end of that table. And when you're building, you need the internet. More than anything, you need to stay connected. The resources you want to access, they're on the internet. You need data. So by needing data, you need money. When I say resources are there, I mean, our startup founders are very well versed in how to build, anecdotally and materially. We've read, we've solved case studies. I myself have been to so many courses, Udemy, edX, Coursera. No, I have all of that knowledge, but it's not very useful to you when there are no practical resources, when you're not able to experiment, fail, and stand up again. We need that support system. When I say we're struggling, that's what it means. The cost of being an early believer in Africa is really high. Thank you to Toyin for saying that. And it's very hard to convince African investors to take that first risk. It's much easier when someone else has taken that risk and you're riding on it. It's like when you see those tweets where people are saying investors start to write their checks once you get into YC. YC has placed a stamp of validation on the startup, and immediately everyone is like, oh yeah, now I can invest. America says yes. But we need to be able to say yes to our own startups first. That is happening, and it's increasingly happening, but we're not where we need to be yet.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That is very clear and a brilliant answer to that question. And I see the fan club in the chat are going wild again, as in appreciation for what you're saying. So thank you. I am, with 10 minutes left on the clock, I am going to draw us to a gentle close and bring us back to the roadmap. So I think the roadmap that we mentioned at the beginning that we're trying to build is aimed primarily at governments, but given that so much of what you've said today is aimed at both at three audiences, really, at startup founders themselves, at funders, and at governments, I wonder if I could just go around the table and ask each of you for one key message that you would like to deliver to either startups or funders or governments that you think we should be highlighting in the roadmap. So Jiba, one closing message, call to action from you. What would you like to see us doing, and who would you like to see doing it?
Yes, I think there's one point that Rebecca mentioned, which is right, is that we need to be honest with, let's say, startups or innovators, and let them know that it's hard, and many times you will fail, but not because you are failing that you have to, let it go or up and down. Many times actually investors are looking for founders that failed once, at least, that knows what it is about, to have real issues and learn from lesson from that, and come back stronger and start something new. So you need to be aware of the fact that the failure rate is quite high, and it's not only specific to Africa, it's on the innovation space, but you shouldn't abandon for that. The other message that I want to say is that many times I meet with people who have great ideas or spend a lot of time working on an MVP and never took the time to think on the business side of it. And that's very important. How are we, when you ask a very simple question, like, how are you going to make money? They are like, okay, I need to think about it. No, think before and then go come to me or go to potential investors, because this is very important. As Rebecca mentioned, we are meeting so many people every day. So, if you don't drag our attention at the beginning, it would be very difficult to have the discussion. So technical is important, but the business side of your, on your company is also something that we need to think about. If you are technical, don't hesitate to reach out to business people and, work together and have something tangible that you come with. The third and final point is that, again, I want to mention that we need to think as Africa as a world market. I really believe that's the best way for us to optimize our chances because the opportunity is there. One reason why I was very interested on joining EcoBank is because the thought at the beginning when the bank was launched was to enable intra-business in Africa to be able to work together because at that time already we could see the opportunity. So think big, think Africa as your market. Even if you start small in your country, there's no issue with that, but really think big if you want to be the next unicorn. And why not think outside of the continent? Now we are seeing even companies like Flutterwave, starting going out of Africa. And I think that's a very, very big signal that we are sending to the ecosystem and to the world. So that will be my message for the ecosystem.
Great, thank you so much. 3 very clear messages to startup founders. Don't be afraid to fail, build your business plan from the beginning and think of Africa as one whole market, and then think beyond Africa. Thank you. Aldrin, we're going to turn to you next. Parting words, parting wisdom, what would be your key call to action for people on the call today?
For the most part, I think I've not spoken about the government, so I'm directed there. I think that there's a lot of miscommunication and a communication gap between startup founders and participants in the ecosystem and the government. And what I hope is clear to both parties is that we're kind of working towards the same goal, or at least we should be, in that we all should kind of be working towards the progression of Africa as a continent. And where I'm sitting, Nigerian vantage point, we definitely should all be working towards the progress of Nigeria. But a lot of what's happened is the relationship has, for the most part, been antagonistic. Founders are trying to do the wrong thing, and the reaction to that is usually to ban or to place restrictions. And I think more effective would be communication, a lot more stakeholder engagement. I honestly always accept to speak on all of those panels Rebecca was talking about, because I'm hoping that the message gets to at least one person, that I don't think that any fintech company is out here trying to break rules. Like, when I didn't wake up one morning, I'm like, I'm going to flout all the rules and build this company that gives people jobs just by disobeying the government or disobeying regulation. But the thing that I think that fintech has a handle on, that the government might need to get a handle on, is that regulation always plays catch up to innovation. That's not to say you don't regulate innovation. It's just to say that it will come first, and then we will figure out the barriers around it. I don't think any fintech company doesn't want guardrails. Flutterwave, Paystack, Piggyvest, Vendease, Mono, all of us, right? We want guardrails, but the other understanding is that it's really important that we know that creating and the solutions that will move Africa out of where we are today into the, we haven't even when I don't know what industrial revolution level we are at, but it's nowhere near where the rest of the world is. And we need audacious experimental solutions to be able to get there. And that bears a bit more conversation, right? This is how this works. This is where this is going. And each side making those points. I've sat in a room with government officials before. I fully understand the reticence. I understand being afraid of what technology could do, because it can do harm. But I think that at the larger scale of it, the advantages are so obvious and so in our faces that it feels like a miss to not be taking advantage of it, right? It feels like a big gap to just watch these things pass us by. We're seeing millionaires being made daily, right? And so I believe that there's solutions that are coming, and I'm hoping again that there is one person who understands that all we're asking for is communication and a chance to just sit at the same table and make our cases. I believe that there is a middle point.
Fantastic, thank you. And for our part, I promise we will do our bit to make sure that your time investment in sitting on this panel translates into at least one person hearing that message. We'll do our bit. Thank you. Thank you, powerful stuff. So Rebecca, over to you to close us out. I was going to say we've heard one message for founders, one message for governments. So over to you for a message for funders, but in fact, take it wherever you would like to. Who's your key message for, and what would you like them to take away?
Well, I'd like to see more initiatives that bring together stakeholders, not just the conversations, but beyond the conversations, have programs that include all of these stakeholders. And I think that, one example I gave earlier is the Catalytic Africa program, where you have the investors, you have the startups, you have the hubs, and you have the funders, the institutional funders that are all part of one program. And so it's an experiment. We don't know how successful it's going to be. We've only had 2 transactions so far of the matching, one in Nigeria, one in Cameroon. And so the program is ongoing, and we'll see what happens out of that. I think, the startups will learn from this, the hubs will learn from this, the institutional funders and the angel investors will all learn from this. But I think, we need more programs like that are created by the grassroots, created by the practitioners, the people that are on the ground, but that include these institutional funders or government. And I think Catalytic Africa, we're hoping that even some governments will participate in, putting money in the pool for the matching. And I think that will be a catalyst, Catalytic Africa, to more early stage funding. Because once it's happening, once those deals are happening, it becomes more ubiquitous. It becomes more normal to see early stage funding, and it's really encouraging. But for beyond the discussions, I really would like to see more cross-stakeholder initiatives happening, where the startups and the hubs and the angel investors have a strong voice in how the program is implemented, not some program that's developed in a government somewhere or in the World Bank somewhere that's then implemented locally. This Catalytic Africa was actually developed by the angel investors by the hubs and is being funded by an institutional investor. And I think I'd really like to see more of that, because I think those conversations becoming reality is where we need to get.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So
and I'm going to interrupt because I said
it
was my last word. I just want to say how great it was to be on this panel with these fantastic women that I admire so much. So yeah, great. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much. I could not agree more. We've come to time, and bearing in mind that you are all extremely busy people doing wonderful things in the world, we will draw to a close there. A huge, huge thank you to all three of you for taking the time to share your wisdom today. It's been a real honor sharing a Zoom room with you these past 90 minutes. And as you can see from the chat, everything that you've said has been massively appreciated by those who have joined us. Thanks so much to our joiners, our participants, our audience for joining us today. I know at this stage in the global pandemic, another Zoom meeting is not what anyone wants to prioritize on a Tuesday morning, but I think you can all agree this has been absolutely worth it. Thanks also to Ventures Platform for co-organizing this event with us. You have been, as I mentioned, fantastic co-organizers, and thank you for everything that you've done. And thank you, huge thanks to my team, to Blaze and Judith in particular, for pulling together all the work on this, all the background, and helping to make this happen. Thanks to all of you online, and we look forward, I hope, to convening another of these conversations in the future, and to seeing a lot of the words and a lot of the hopes that the panelists have expressed today coming to reality. So let's hope that we see even more beautiful things happening in the world of tech on the continent. Thank you so much.
Hi, Oba. Hi, guys. Oh.